then I was able to work part-time at things. And then, but when I got out, I realized the teachers were not making much money, and I thought I'd get a real estate license and maybe work on the weekends, you know, open houses. Mm-hmm. And I fell in love with it. Mm-hmm. I just fell in love with it. But I remember so many times in the beginning, just got married, and I spent literally a couple years just touch and go. I worked a track of homes at one time out in the Garden Grove area, and I did make some money off that, and I put that money in the bank, and I allocated money every month from that, as long as that lasted, because I didn't sell a thing for 6 months on General House. Then I sold a couple. Well, meantime, I would say, I'm going back to teaching. At least it's consistent. I have a paycheck. And just about time I'd sell the house. Oh, I would never leave this business. This is the greatest. And I was touch and go for a couple of years until I established myself. And I ended up, you know, selling houses to my friends and I went to high school with, their folks, and it was a very local thing for me at that time until I kind of grew up literally and become more stabilized.
So that takes us to your eventual involvement in local government. I want to talk about that and how you got involved in local government and sort of the chain of events that led you to ultimately run for mayor.
It started in the 1960 when I was in real estate, you know, full bore by that time. And George Bradford, who was a councilman, who I had known all my life, called me one day and asked me, he wants to submit my name for the Planning Commission. And I really didn't know too much about it, to be honest with you. But I said, well, what's involved? He said, well, it's two nights a month, you know, plus, you know, doing your background work. And I said, okay. So he submitted it, and I was approved, and I'd become a planning commissioner for 2 years, from 1960 to 62. Previous to that, I got some name identification because I was president of the Torrance Centennial Board of Realtors in 1959. And I guess that gave me a little exposure. And so I served 2 years on the Planning Commission and truly loved it. I really enjoyed it. But I get upset sometimes when we recommend things to the city council and they would overturn us. We were only a recommending body. Mm-hmm. And so I decided to run for council. And I won. I was the most surprised guy in the world. I was one of three. There was 3 seats open. Mm-hmm. And I got the 3rd seat at that time. And but then I served 4 years as councilman. And on my brochures, I insisted, because I believed wholeheartedly in 2-term limits. And that was prior to any time that 2-term limits was even mentioned. Nobody had suggested it. So I served as a councilman for 4 years, and I re-ran. And I had said 2-term limits, so I would not run for any office more than 2 terms, any particular office. And so I served that, and at that time there was things happening in the city that weren't very good. We'll get involved in that, and I had won the 2nd term as councilman pretty readily, by a majority. So several people asked me to run for mayor, and I jumped at it, and I ran and I won. And then I served the 2nd term as mayor, and that was it. And then I suggested at that time that we establish a 2-term limit on the council and mayor. Well, the council came to me, a couple of them, said, if you're going to run again, we'll support you, but if you say you're not, I said, yeah, but I'd like to put on the ballot the 2-term limits. So they put it on the ballot for mayor, but not for council. And it won overwhelmingly. I don't know whether they wanted to get rid of me or what, but it won overwhelmingly, and that became a 2-term limit for the mayor in the 70s. So at that time, later on, future years, councils put themselves in that same position. So that's why the 2-term limits existed in the city. And when I say I have to say we. We had a great city manager, and we had a great city attorney, people that I could, actually live with. And
who were
Ed
in those
Ferrero
roles
was the
at
city
Ed Ferrero,
administrator, and Stanley was the city attorney. And we sat down when I took office in '70 and set a program out. What did we want to do? And I say that's why it's we and not I. But I did say the most I want to see is get some parkland in the city of Torrance. We were way short. And amazingly, during the early 70s, we were able to acquire that 1 year, 200 acres of parkland. Wilson Park, Columbia Park, that's 100 acres, give or take. And then several small parks, such as Delthorn on Madrona. When developers came in to build houses, we made them set aside parkland for a park throughout the city. So the accumulation was 200 acres, and we were able, but we had no money to develop it. But we land banked it at the prices there. And Wilson Park in itself is a story all by itself. That was Navy surplus property. And Navy was just using it as storage. Our congressman was Charlie Wilson, and we got hold of Wilson. He lived right here on Torrance Boulevard, and said, we'd like to acquire that for the city, since it's surplus property. Well, in order to get our job done, we invited, I think his name was Ebert, Congressman Ebert, and Congressman Ebert was the chairman of the Armed Forces military budget. The entire military budget was controlled by that group. And we brought him out as the marshal for our parade and we paraded him around the land and said, boy, we really like to get that for a park. And they went back there and they told the Navy, make a deal with Torrance. Well, we didn't have the kind of money. It's several millions of dollars for 50 acres of land. So we met with the VIPs from the Navy at San Francisco Airport, the VIP room. And the Admiral walked in and said, well, we're told to make a deal with you. What can you afford to pay? Well, Stanley said, well, I think we can pay about $5,000 an acre, or $250,000. Mm-hmm. He just turned around and said, take it. He walked out.
Wow.
And then we were able to acquire that. And we had money coming from the government that would help us pay for that $250,000. Mm-hmm. Columbia Park was a little different story in the terms of we acquired some land through federal funding, and the west side of that area is the CBS owns, mm-hmm. and they had a tower there. They still have it. The tower, they said you can use that land for a park as long as you want, provided you built no structures on it. In other words, they didn't want anything tinker with their tower.
Right.
And we bought out a rose nursery on the corner, mm-hmm. and we acquired the rest of the money through some funding through the government, and we were able to get that. And then the rest of it was all, as I said, by the developers having set aside property for a park in their development, and mm-hmm. That spread all over town. I can't even name the parks that are as a result of that.
Another program that I want to talk about that you really had a hand in starting is the Sister City program, and it's been a very important and long-standing program here in Torrance, and that's the Sister City relationship with Kashiwa, Japan. Tell me how that evolved and why that was such a passion for you.
That's a love of labor for me. In 1973, the Lions Club in Torrance become reacquainted with the Lions Club in Kashiwa, acquainted. And the idea, concept was created from their relationship. Then the Lions Club in Torrance came to the city and said, look, we want to get together and create a program for Cashua City and Torrance. So we, as I say, it's we, sat down and figured out what we could do and what we couldn't do. And so 5 of us flew to Cashua in 1973 and met with the mayor and the city council there. It so happens there was a little hesitancy on the part of Cashua because there were people that were on their council, and they have huge councils, numbers, that didn't really want that relationship. But after a year or two, that simmered down, and we developed the sister program. That was over 36 years ago. Little did I dream that it would be created in such a manner that it has sending students, from the Cashua people, kids coming to our city every year. And the relationship, of course, we have a large Japanese contingents in Torrance. And so we got very much support from them. And particularly one, Hazel Taniguchi, who has been very active in that program for years, along with many other people that I failed to mention. But the program is strong, and it's big, huge membership now. And I'm very proud of that.
And one of the hot issues debated during your tenure was the extension of Madrona Avenue, both north and south. Tell us why that was important and what the outcome was of that.
Colleen, Madrona at that time, dead in at Del Amo Boulevard to the north, and dead in at Sepulveda on the south. Our goal was to extend Madrona over the Mobile Oil property to connect with Prairie. There's a north-south, taking a lot of traffic. And Mobile Oil negotiated and was very reasonable what they did, and that bridge was built over that, and that got the Del Amo intersection connected with the Prairie intersection. Right on through Prairie goes way up north, what the plan was, we wanted to go all the way from Sepulveda to Alameda Boulevard, and the people and rightfully so, I suppose, in New Horizons opposed this plan because it brought literally the highway back, sighting on the one part of their development. There are a lot of senior citizens in there, and they didn't want that, and that was holding up getting the bridge. It was all one plan. So the only thing we could do was at that time, in order to get the bridge in and get that done, is to separate the two and get that done. And I asked to be, because I was very pro about extending the Alameda Boulevard, I asked that they keep it as a vacant area street, so you can put a street in at a future time. If you go down to Madrona to Sepulveda, you'll find there's a rail line there, the area. We could have put that all the way through Alameda Boulevard and only removed 3 houses on the west side, but it never took place. So we made a paper street, is the way they call it, out of that area. Unfortunately, because of a lot of, I'm sure, politics, and I think our future councils deleted that paper street and allowed the rezoning and build a lot of industrial buildings, which is very good for the city of Torrance too.
Right.
You get back in there and you'll see tremendous industrial projects going on. But we did get that far done, and it did open up that. It was very significant, taking the traffic off of Hawthorne Boulevard and Crenshaw.
Absolutely. And
it would have been great if it got to Alameda Boulevard. Alameda Boulevard was not the stop Pacific Coast High was, because that would have joined Madison at Alameda Boulevard, and you go south you'd hit Pacific Coast Highway because that street was already in on it.
Yeah.